and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore of the Old World, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our ghouls from our goblins,
I'm distracting
our snotlings from our Skaven storm fiends,
Distractions.
and our bloodthirsters from our bloodletters, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer stuff? My name is Ben Crumbarber, and I know fuck all about Warhammer. With me is my co-host, Christopher Crallin Allen.
I'm still in my pajamas.
Who also knows fuck all about Warhammer.
Very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
I'm also in Chris's pajamas.
Who knows so much about Warhammer, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. After gathering online to slay some vermin in the name of Sigmar, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address
that ignorance.
Ignorance, yes. Yeah.
Well done, Kral. Well done.
I held back. I didn't do a full-on Dhar.
No.
Very few people can. Even at my best, 10% of the time I can manage a full-on Dhar.
In order to maintain Darren's reputation, I have to edit out all of the shit that he tries to say to distract. Well, he says to try and distract me during the edit, so during the intro. So no one will actually know
how much of an asshole he is.
Yeah.
Darren admitting he's rarely himself, even when he tries really hard, reminds me of that bit. I think is it Danger Mouse, and his sidekick Penfold.
Best character ever.
The greatest achievement of Penfold was coming third in a Penfold lookalike competition.
If I may say, second place was taken by Kral.
But Darren, guess who first place was taken by?
Was it also you, mate? First and second place in the Penfold lookalike. That is your best joke to date, Dhar. I have to admit.
So far.
So far. Right, Crowley, you know what time it is, bud?
Hello, Reichland. It's time for Sarah's recap.
Hooray! Last episode 30. Me scurvy dog landlubbers was all about the zombie coast and the undead pirates. I don't know what voice this is.
Pirates don't have Welsh accents.
No, they do today, Darren. They do today.
I'm a vampire, see, boyo.
We learned about the zombie coast. We did, boyo. And I'm done.
Right. The rest of it in a Welsh accent, please.
No.
Tony Blackburn doing an impression of Herb with a Welsh accent.
Yes.
Right. You're going to get the summaries of summaries. Luther Harkon hijacked, landed on Lustria, fucking went to get some relics of power, got his mind smashioed by the Vault's defenses, built up an army of undead pirates, army arties, hooked up with Marathi. Marathi backstabbed him while they were looking for the Black Pearls, wink. He got locked up in a vault, and that's your lot. That's all you're getting from me. I'm done. I'm leaving. Bye. See you later.
And he's walked out of the room.
That was the stroppiest WhatsApp recap I've ever heard.
that is literally your lot. How was that?
Yeah, it was
Best
good.
summary, worst attitude.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
10 for summary, 1 for attitude. 9 for summary. I don't want to give you a perfect score.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
All right, well, that was that.
It was a ruddy, bloody fun episode. It was a really good one,
It was
actually.
a swashbuckler.
It was a romp. It was a swashbuckling romp of an episode, wasn't it? It was really good.
It doesn't seem to be a huge amount of lore about it. It's quite new in terms of lore development, isn't it?
Yes, relatively so.
Darren, was it really a bit of fun? I mean, yes, Luther Archon's very much a big bad. The characters and units are all, quite meaningful, but was, that, I guess, kind of spin-off-y type thing with the zombie pirate vibe? Was it a bit of fun in kind of an ode to Pirates of the Caribbean?
Of course it was. I mean, it's completely divorced from the medieval horror of the old world in the setting. So it is as much, if we continue with the Pirates of the Caribbean analogy, it was, in terms of movies, Pirates of the Caribbean versus Schindler's List. So those two very widely different movies. That is perhaps a bit a scandalous thing to say, but in terms of the kind of background emotion in the old world is just a horrific place. I was about to say the zombie pirates of the Vampire Coast is also horrific, but it's sunny. The weather's nice.
That's it. And everyone's yo-ho-ho with a bottle of rum in it. And you've got choco blocks.
Oh, God almighty. Do you know how much just that I am not looking forward to doing some of the Lizard Man episodes with the fucking names? God.
They're going to take us forever, aren't they? Me and Ben are going to lose our shit.
Did the undead go from zombie to skeleton faster in a kind of humid tropical environment? Does the rot set in faster?
This gets into the whole kind of physiology of zombification that myself and my son have a chat about. And at one stage...
Is this a regular conversation?
Honest to God, it happens about once every 3 months. And the last time, Vic joined in, and it became a little bit heated, I have to say, because we were talking about, do zombies need to poo?
Yeah, right, okay. Because of the flesh they're eating, you mean?
Because of all the flesh they're eating, but why? Yeah, but like, yeah, I would say they didn't, but everyone kept going off about, of course zombies do, which... all of these movies would be so much, all these movies and TV shows would be so much more wildly different if you had to kind of tiptoe your way through zombie shit.
Yeah.
That would just...
And if they were kind of shambling and shitting at the same time.
Yeah.
Like just kind of a single motion, a single movement.
Yeah.
Well, in a lot of like zombie video games, you get like, special zombie characters like a screamer or, a jumper. You get a bloater or something. A bloater is always really common, isn't it? You'd expect, given that they probably don't shit, I mean, I think I'm definitely with you on that one. You'd expect to see more bloaters, wouldn't you? Like if they were just constantly, and it would unless they, they rotted around the kind of intestinal area and it was just falling out as they were eating it. But who knows? But
you get into that classic trope of a skeleton takes a drink and it all just kind of runs down. So it's like, what? Why are they drinking? Why is a zombie eating? Is it because they have no option but to eat because their lizard brain has been activated?
Okay,
those kinds of questions. It gets quite heated. Yeah.
Interesting to follow on from that. Then, given that zombies in Warhammer are the end result of necromancy, they're not just the end result of like, a virus or something like that from other zombie IPs. Do the zombies in Warhammer eat flesh, given that they are, in essence, an automaton under the control of a necromancer? Because why would the necromancer instruct them to do that?
I think it's to do with how easy it is to raise a zombie. Because all you're doing is you're forcing the kind of lizard basic brain aspect of an individual to come back online and then reanimating their tissue with magic.
How to raise a zombie.
The end result, yeah.
There should be a pamphlet for that.
Is exactly the
for
same.
New zombie parents. Sorry, Darren.
Oh yeah, well, to be
fair, all over your dialogue.
I can't work like this. Please eject him from the...
I'll be in my trailer.
The end result is exactly the same in all of these shows and IPs with viruses. It's, the limbic system that comes back online, the lizardy brain bit, plus reanimated muscle tissue. That's it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So zombies in the Warhammer setting do eat flesh as normal zombies would do.
And they are for the most part the slow shambling zombie.
Yes.
There are some abilities and spells that can speed them up into 28 days later zombies. But in general, it's the brains stagger. Yeah.
I always wonder with the 28 days later, does it start like that and then become the shambling? Because obviously they would disintegrate, wouldn't they? So slowly their ability to run would... The zombies in 28 days later, though, are they dead? I can't remember if they come... Yeah, I think they are dead, aren't they? I thought it was just like a rage virus that kind of made live people...
I seem to remember it being like a rage virus. It wasn't... They weren't undead, as it were.
Right.
And also, slow shambling zombies don't make much of an assault force. Do you know what I mean? Like a fucking...
Yeah.
Storm squad or anything.
Oh no, they're coming!
Attack!
Everybody walk away!
But that does lead us nicely into content.
Rumble.
The last content for the undead, please.
Oh, you're going to be surprised to hear me say this, but thank Christ. It's been a million episodes. I can't recall exactly. Well, 9.
Has it been so long because there's been so much lore because you've wanted to expand it more, say, than the Skaven and other episodes we've done because you're into it?
I think that's certainly a thing to maybe accept, but also we didn't just do vampire accounts. We had to start with Nagash and Nehekara, and then moved into Morkane, up into the Badlands. So there was 2 or 3 episodes before we even got into the relatively modern timeline of the vampire accounts. I think also married into that is that the undead are not only everywhere, but most of the major events that have not included chaos, the kind of chaos forces, have been the undead. They've been the primary enemy for the kind of existential existence of the Empire and other realms within the old world. So they have, the Vampire Wars was 150, 160 years where the Empire was simply fighting the undead all the time, and every now and then there was an orc invasion. Mr. Chris.
Would there have ever been a situation, was there a situation where someone wanted to join the undead faction? They were like, undead me, either make me into a zombie or I'll just join your faction willingly. They're like, that's the winning team, that's the one I want to be on.
Not that I'm aware of, not voluntarily. Well, not willingly. I know of at least one instance during the end times where a very high-ranked mage transfers over to the side of the vampire counts. But he did so in kind of a mix of desperation and acceptance of fate. Right. So only once, and we'll talk about Balthazar Gelt when we do the Empire.
Balthy B.
Balthy G, yeah.
Bizzle Jizzle.
Bizzle Jizzle. Yes, so the undead is one of the big bads of the Warhammer Fantasy IP and has touched the lives, in quotes, of almost all factions.
And me and Kral.
And you and Kral. Yes. And me.
I've been touched.
You've been Show me on the small skeleton where Nagash touched you.
So
someone said content?
Yeah.
Someone said content, yeah.
I think I heard someone say content.
Because we've kind of dived into the faction in quite a significant amount of detail, there's actually
this will be a 5-minute episode.
Well, funnily enough, we've now discussed what skeletons are, and zombies, and necromancers, and. So we're going to kind of dart around a bit. But I think a good place to start is the lore of the vampire counts, like the spells and the abilities that go with associated bloodlines, that kind of thing. So, broadly speaking, there are 3 groups of spells within the kind of necromantic lore. Now, we are speaking about vampire counts.
Big War, Little War, and not War at all.
Big Dead War, Little Dead War.
And War.
And War. So there are spells to raise and maintain the dead forces. So zombies, skeletons, dire wolves, and sometimes, if you're lucky,
undead badgers.
Actual better troops than badgers, horses.
Did you just say badgers at the same time I said badgers, Chris? Are you feeling
Jinx?
Oh, thank you.
You got I for the rest of the show.
I can't speak now.
Fuck. Thank God.
So the 2 most kind of famous versions of these types of spells, one is called Raise the Dead. Guess what it does?
Original.
It cures hangovers. It allows you to raise a number of dead troops. So skeletons, zombies, direwolves, in general, that's what you can do. Then to maintain the dead, there is a spell which was really introduced in the 8th edition, so the final edition of Fantasy, which was the Invocation of Nehek, which allowed you to, every turn, return or either heal a wound to a damaged unit or return a number of troops to that unit. So it's bringing dead troops to the tabletop, or if we keep it lore focused, raising the dead troops for your army and then making sure that you can keep them going. So if you'll recall when we discussed Conrad, all the troops were getting annihilated at the kind of gun line, and his necromancers were working to reknit the bones and the tissue of the troops and send them back into battle. So
they were art attacking them, weren't they?
That art attacking, exactly right.
Yeah.
A little necromancer sewing circle, knitting these skeletons back together. A little stitch
An
and
undead
bitch.
stitch bitch. Growl jinx.
A topical observation, really, there would be like a necromantic Rolf Harris creating skeletons and saying, "Can you tell what it is yet?
Can you tell if it's in you?"
And we'll move on.
Jesus.
The next group is really empower the undead, and this is where you can turn regular shambling zombies into the 28 days later speedy zombies.
Oh, nice.
Not just zombies, but also skeletons and other undead troops. The most famous one, it's the spell that has lasted relatively unchanged, is Van Hall's Dance Macabre. So that is effectively a spell to invigorate the undead and to...
Sounds like a dance school. Van Hall's Dance Macabre.
And all these skeletons just start voguing.
And cartwheeling.
Like
and tumbling.
An undead flash dance.
Yeah, like a Madonna concert, yeah. So... While I did say that the spell has remained relatively unchanged, it has been diluted over the editions. In 4th edition, it was very, very powerful, which it meant that you could have a unit attacking several times in a round instead of just once, or moving 3 times its speed, give this sudden blast of undead energy and get your troops into combat really as quickly as possible. Because in general, aside from spells, the undead don't really have any artillery or missile troops for range combat. Mr. Ben.
You know how you said that in a couple of the battles during the Vampire War, when the main leader, whether it was Vlad or Manfred, fled or were killed, the whole army kind of dropped dead, bar a kind of circumference around the remaining necromancers. Is there any rules on the tabletop that mimic that? Like, my understanding of the tabletop is that it's round based, and if before the end of the game, the opposing team kill the necromancers or the kind of main necromantic magic users in an undead army, does that render the rest of the army void?
Yes, it's one of the few examples where a large kind of high concept notion of an army, a central idea of the army, reflects the lore. In earlier editions, if your general in fact, in most editions, if your general dies, your army begins to become untethered and the summonings fail. So it means that every round you roll a d6 and that many troops from a given unit drop dead.
Wow, right.
That used to be for every single unit in your army, regardless. What happened as the editions were refined, or new editions came out, it was that, you still roll a d6, but if you're within 12 inches of a necromancer, you have the score. At higher levels, you don't need to roll for that kind of thing. So yes, targeting magic users in an undead army, while I would suggest is bad sportsmanship, is a very effective way to weaken your army or weaken your opponent's army. Yeah,
that's cool. That's really cool.
So the augmentation spells, really, the enhancement spells for the undead forces. So it's things like Van Hell's Dance Macabre, as I've mentioned, Hellish Vigor. This is
I've bought that snake oil before.
Hellish Vigor, yeah. This allows units to add 1 to combat rolls when they're trying to hit something with swords. That actually used to be part of Van Hell's or Dance Macabre. As I said, in 4th edition, it was an extremely powerful spell. In 8th edition, it's more of a kind of flavoursome spell. It does give you a benefit, but it's not as powerful as it once was on the tabletop. The final groups of spells then are to you go from raise the dead to empower the dead to make your enemies dead.
That sounds quite promising.
So these are spells like the Curse of Years, where you can put a hex on your an enemy unit, and then you have to roll a dice for every single model, for instance. And if you get above a certain score, that model dies of old age.
And does that model then become undead? Do you then raise it, or is it?
No. Really, the only way to raise the dead in the games has been with a spell effect or a magical item. In general, it's really more the forces of chaos that have that kind of ability that can mutate and change. I'm thinking something like Nurgle's Rot, a spell for Nurgle, which can not only take an enemy soldier out of action, but actually can turn them into a demon. They become possessed, effectively. But as I say, this is an episode about the dead, so fuck Nurgle in the ear. They also have one which follows our naming trope. We have the Gaze of Nagash, where you give someone the evil eye. Yes, huge bolts of dark energy blast out of your eyes and wither people's skin with its evilness.
Ooh. Sounds really scary, Nagash. Watch out for my gaze. Okay.
Okay.
If you could just look at this pan of chicken here, please.
The evil chicken Alfredo of Nagash. I wouldn't touch that, mate. That's the Empire Biscuit of Nagash. Yeah. Those are the three kind of broad groupings of spells. These have existed in some form throughout the editions of Warhammer since the advent of the army books. In fact, the Vampire Counts is one of only 4 factions that have had an army book for every edition from 4th to 8th. The others being High Elves, Lizardmen, and Chaos. At some stage, every other faction has gone without an army book for an edition.
Wow. But the undead are just so boss that they get one each edition. Okay.
Yeah. Which is surprising considering the huge focus GW has on the Empire as well as the human troops. Anyway.
Is that because, I mean, is it, obviously it might be different for the other races that you mentioned there, but given that undead is a collection of different races, is it just because there's so much with it? Like it's such a broad category that there's so much development in there that it has to have a new army book every edition?
I think it's because they are perhaps the highest selling armies, the ones that are the most popular, but also of those 4, 2 of them are like big bads. You've got the Chaos. Like with Chaos, you can make 5 or 6 different factional armies. With Vampire Counts, you can make, again, 5 or 6 different factional armies based on the bloodline of the vampire that's leading it.
Cool.
Segue! The next section is vampire powers.
Seamless.
So when you said that those were like 3 broad, sorry, just to go back a moment, like you said that those are like the 3 broad categorizations of spells. The first one was like Raise the Dead. What are there multiple different versions of Raise the Dead? Because it kind of seems like a pretty standard singular function.
It's a single spell. But there are like even in the tabletop game you can cast the spell at different levels, which have different difficulty numbers that you have to roll against.
Right.
You can raise up to a unit of 18 zombies or skeletons in one go, and suddenly your opponent is now facing more points in terms of the size of the army than were put on the table.
but really fucking slow and shambling. Yeah.
Yes. Until then, you empower them or augment them with the Van Hell's
Dance Macabre.
Dance Macabre.
They just vogue their way to the enemy.
But yeah, no, I was about to say I don't want to alarm anyone, but there are what appear to be a lot of zombies moonwalking towards our front lines.
They've got some moves.
It's Thriller. Thriller. So yes, vampire powers. We mentioned when we were initially talking about the bloodlines, 5 broad bloodlines exist or are acknowledged within the Vampire Count's army books. They are the Von Karsteins, the Blood Dragons, the Necrarchs, the Strigoi, and the Lamians. The Lamians.
Good work, Chris.
So those distinctions did not exist in the first Undead army book. It was just simply vampire counts. It was just a vampire. Yeah. It was when they started to when they broke between the dry and the wet dead, when it broke between the Tomb Kings and the vampire counts, the vampire counts being the wet dead. That's when you got into abilities specific for that bloodline. So the Von Karsteins would be the kind of stereotypical Dracula figure. They'd have capacity to control the weather, to control swarms of beasts, but also to they'd have lordship. They'd have that kind of nobility, the aggressive, neck-biting nobility, which I'd love to say doesn't exist anymore. Just read the fucking news. Now,
how does that translate on the tabletop? Let the roll 6 to be more noble. What does that do?
Oh no, it gives them command bonuses, so they're able to command their troops better because they're nobles who have been trained.
They're more noble.
So it's
okay. I've been outnobled
by the gaze of Nagash. Yeah. But then you get into the Necrarch bloodline. They're like evil Gandalfs. They're undead evil Gandalfs. So they have magical enhancements. And we'll just move on. I'm just going to leave that statement exactly where it is.
Mm-hmm. Me and My Magical Enhancement by Christopher Crowlin Allen.
It's not mine, baby. It's not mine.
They're better at casting spells. They know more spells. They can cast other versions of spells and are all-round necromantic gods. The blood dragons then are the kind of martial idea of the vampire warrior. So they have this kind of twisted idea of knightly honor. That's knightly with a K. So a very kind of Teutonic Templar kind of idea of what it is to be a master warrior. The Lamians then are very swift. So they have this, the vampiric stereotype of being incredibly quick. They always strike first in combat. They also have mind manipulation powers, which we'll talk about when we talk about the units. And the Strigoi are this kind of bestial, pure fury given form kind of idea of what it is to be a vampire. So in 5 broad categories, they kind of capture all the stereotypes that come with vampires. Now, interestingly, in the World of Darkness, there are 13 vampiric clans. That's a completely separate IP, but it's just they have 13 stereotypes to play with and many more. But that's a different game and probably won't make it into the episode. So that was completely pointless.
Okay. Pointless. Excellent. Move on.
I enjoyed that, though. It was a nice interlude. I'm assuming that the Strigoi are purely melee combat.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't have anything ranged, do they?
No, not at all. I mean,
not necromantic any bit.
No, they are, but they're not standing there with shotguns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They should do.
They should do, yeah. If you recall from the Morcane episodes, most of them are just waist height. They're just, standing in a trench all the time.
yeah. I remember that, Darren.
That was a good callback. Yeah.
Kral can't even remember waking up this morning, so don't worry about it.
I don't even know how I got here. My earliest memory is Van Hall's Dance Macabre. Who knows?
Yeah. Those powers were explicitly tied to vampiric bloodlines in the 5th and 6th edition. Now, from 7th and 8th, they kind of steered away from that kind of strict grouping. In 7th, you had broadly grouped abilities under kind of logical headings. Like you had Master, which dealt with the control of troops, but also the summoning of beasts. So broadly speaking, von Karstein, but it had aspects of other bloodlines in it as well. Again, you had the Marshal, which again tied to Blood Dragon, but included elements from Strigoi, this kind of idea, and the Acolyte, which was Necrarch, but it meant that you could have merged bloodlines, if you will. Effectively, it allowed you to create your own.
That's cool.
So it meant you could have incredibly magically accomplished von Karstein vampire, but also one who was very bestial as well. And so it merged the 5 lines together.
Kral, if you could have your own vampire bloodline, what would your ability be? What would your special
I could just concoct it. Anything.
Yeah.
God, let's put me on the spot.
Summon Tampax.
Yeah. But it had to be under those umbrella. Had to be like summon, vigor, or dancify or something. It had to be one of those.
Or okay.
Yeah.
Smurfs of Death.
Smurfs of Death. It would have to be.
It's the spell of Kral's memory. He casts the spell on the opponent, and they just forget what the fuck they're doing in that battlefield, and they just walk away.
It would be called the WhatsApp recap.
Yeah.
He casts it every record. What are we doing? What are we doing in our lives?
The gaze of Kral.
The gaze of Kral.
Just Kral. Indecisive Kralacast. Shall I attack? Maybe I won't attack. I will attack? No, I won't. I might attack, but I'll let you know in a bit. Turns out I can't attack. I'm going to go over there instead. See ya.
So then we're moving on. So then within the final edition, they even got rid of those kind of logical groupings, and you could pick from a much reduced list of powers to augment your vampire. And it sort of makes sense because mechanically in the game, within the previous editions, in general, you could have each Lord character, each general could have 100 points worth of magic items in addition to whatever abilities they already had, depending on their race. With the vampire counts, you could get not only 100 points of magic items, but you could get 100 points of vampire abilities as well, which made them stupidly powerful on the tabletop. It also meant that if you killed them, it's a point sink, basically. If you kill a Lord character, say, for instance, from the Empire, it's about, depending on how you kit them out, it's about 200 points worth of your army. Vampire counts, you could have up to 400 points killed by a cannonball. And if they didn't have the magic ring of Vlad, which was an item you could actually have,
cool.
That's 400 points gone.
Permadeath.
Yeah, permadeath. Yeah, so that, I mean, certainly within the vampire count armies, it's a balancing act of incredibly powerful and magical characters versus very basic troops that you could summon again and again and again.
Is there any day or nighttime setting for a battle on the tabletop? Like, if you come along with your undead army or vampire count army, can you roll? You have to roll a dice at the start, and if the opposing team wins, the opposing army wins, they go, right, it's midday, and therefore your vampire count army has to start the match having a nap.
I think that in some of the 6th and 7th edition general handbooks, which were or general's handbook, it would give you rules to be able to do that, but on a regular game, just using the core rulebook and the vampire counts book, you wouldn't. There's nothing like that. they would get around it by saying, you could have battles fought during the day, but it would be incredibly overcast. So the sun wouldn't get through.
Right.
And that kind of thing. And
I'd love to see the Vampire Count's army with a number of napping tents, like miniatures for napping tents, just placed at the side. Like
the napping thing is purely in the lore, right? It's just a lore thing.
I mean, in vampire lore in general, they sleep during the day. Interestingly, in the Dracula novel, Dracula himself could move around in the day, and he could stand in the sunshine. But
he just chose not to.
His powers would be reduced, but he was still, eminently powerful. Moving on to vampires. So, yes, as I say, in 8th edition, all kind of strict framework for bloodlines was effectively abandoned. This was justified within the lore by saying that as the further people get from Nehekhara in terms of generationally, when one of the original 10 came out of Nehekhara and made a vampire, that vampire, we'll call it second generation, was closely tied to the bloodline. If you're now that vampire makes another vampire, makes another vampire, and on, you've got 14, 15, 20 generations down the line, it's very loosely tied to the concept of that strict bloodline, if you know what I mean.
It gets a bit Deliverance by that point, doesn't it?
Ding, 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 ding.
There's a lot of
that would be a great power on the tabletop. The Banjo of Doom.
Instills fear.
Now, we shall move on to the actual troops available to a Vampire Count's force. Now, as I said...
Skeletons and zombies. Done.
Done,
next.
Kral, what is the... Can we ask our resident collective noun expert for the collective nouns for skeletons and zombies? Maybe one of each?
I
thought we said it was a xylophone.
Yeah, or a glockenspiel, or a wind chime. A wind chime of skeletons.
Oh, a wind chime, that's right. Yeah.
A wind chime of skeletons, yeah.
Zombies could be a slurry of...
Was that a COD conversation?
Yeah, that was a COD.
That was a COD conversation.
Yeah.
Tier 2 Patreon listeners only. www.patreon.com/laying down the law.
Nicely done.
Whew, just plug time.
As a selling point for COD, one of us is always nude. And I'm not going to say which one.
It changes every episode.
Ben's arms are nude every episode.
We roll a dice, and if it's below 6, it's Kral.
If it's a nat 1, we all get naked.
With some of the conversations we have, we roll a dice every fucking episode.
Yes.
Now, yes, so we've covered a lot of the forces already, so we won't really get into skeletons and zombies too much. Not really going to hammer necromancers, other than, if you ever meet one, hammer them with a hammer. And vampires, we sort of know what we're talking about here. So really what I'm going to do is cover the exceptions. So if we already accept that, the basic kind of concepts that exist on the tabletop, what else is there? So in terms of a vampire, we go from kind of bog standard vampire count to a vampire lord. That's the kind of hero and general positions on the kind of army roster. But in the lore, there are two other aspects or two other versions of vampires that exist. The first is the Vargheists, and these are bestial vampires who kind of they've gone through a process of degradation, so they've lost their kind of higher function to some extent, but also they are become poisoned by the warp stone that's within Sylvania. So these are beings that kind of are grossly swollen, so they're about the size of an ogre, in some cases quite larger, but they have developed their arms have changed into wings, and so they flitter around the battlefield like blood-sucking hummingbirds, giant blood-sucking hummingbirds,
Jesus Christ.
Who really only wears a loincloth and just descends in flocks onto units of enemy soldiers. So they're frenzied and absolutely decimate their opponents.
In a loincloth.
In a loincloth.
So you don't want to be stood directly under them.
Yeah. They use tit tape just to keep it in place. The last thing you want to see is that thing moving as they're coming down. Like, whoa! Get that gooch out of my face. Bring those wings over here.
Oh, I know you've ripped my arm off, but it's touching me, mate. Can you put the mouse back in the house? Yeah.
Decency. What? Sorry, what were they called?
Vargheists. So these are... It's an involuntary process. It's effectively like a bestial disease that they go through. It's not particularly contagious, and you can't tell if a vampire is going to catch it.
Some people call it lucky.
Some people.
Are you having a passion for dancing? Would you like to move gracefully like a banshee? Fly through the air like a Varghulf? Then, my friend, you should come join here. Van Hell's School of the Dancing. We offer beginner and advanced lessons in tango, samba, jazz dance, bolero, salsa, hip-hop, and of course, the world-famous Van Hell's Dance Macabre. Guaranteed to bring the joy of dance to even the most unanimated. So, unleash your passion for movement and express yourself at Van Hell's School of the Dancing. Cha-cha-cha.
But you then also have the other kind of type of vampires called a Varghulf. They willingly go through this process. So they retain a lot of their higher mental functions, but they embrace the bestial nature of it. And so, how would you describe them? They are a mix between a troll, a giant bat, and a vampire. That's effectively what they are. They are absolute killing machines. And in general, they are solitary, because they've gone through this process to embrace their bestial nature and don't really want to have anything to do with the kind of day-to-day, political
they don't want to talk about it.
Of the vampire world. Yeah.
Is that why they would voluntarily go for it? It's like hitting the fuck it button. They're like, I don't want to be part of society anymore.
All or nothing.
I mean, without any other enhancement or items, magic items or anything like that, they are significantly more powerful than even a vampire lord. They could rip one in half. So they do it for the
pure
love
strength.
of pure strength, or indeed they've gone, fuck it, I don't want to be a vampire count. I don't want to have to rule over the living and the dead.
Just want to tear shit to pieces. Vargheists, Varghulfs,
Varghulf.
Gulf, as in G-U-L-F, Gulf. Varghulfs.
G-H-U-L-F-S, yeah. Varghulfs, yeah.
Varghulfs.
So on the tabletop, Vargheists they come in multiple of 3s in terms of unit size. Giggity. And Varghulfs are solitary single beasts that can...
but would they still fight in an army?
Yes. Because they're still vampires.
If they've gone for this kind of solitary thing because they don't want to have anything to do with all of that, why would they be in the army? Have they been kind of...
Because, the Vargheists become more bestial,
right,
and thus are able to be controlled by a vampire who has dominion over beasts.
Right, okay.
Varghulfs can still be reasoned with, and if they feel threatened, they will join,
okay.
Yeah, so a Varghulf can still be reasoned with, yeah.
Okay, right. So they'd be like, dude, I know that you like chilling on your own, but that dude over there said your mum was fat. I was like, okay, wow.
So those were the vampires. The 4 different kind of flavors you can get in terms of their appearance and abilities. For the vast majority of a vampire count's army, or the vast majority of a vampire count's army, is made up of skeletons, zombies, and ghouls. Ghouls being the living, undead, cannibalistic graveyards. I'm going to use the word scrumpers, because they scrump bodies out of graveyards. There is a larger version of a crypt ghoul called a crypt horror. Now, these are ghouls that have been fed vampire blood, and they, again, swell up to the size of roughly an ogre. So it's a cannibal the size of an ogre, or in general, that's really what ogres are, but are under the kind of necromantic control of necromancers.
Well summarized.
Yeah, these are used really as like either heavy infantry or shock troops. So you can imagine a kind of tide of cannibals heading straight towards you, kind of all green and awkward and ghoulish, and then dotted in among them are these kind of larger, more significantly sized crypt horrors who are going to F your S up. Mr. Chris.
Wow.
Cannibals are species that eat their own species, humans eating humans.
Yes.
I don't know, bloody crocodiles eating crocodiles, ogres eating ogres, that kind of thing. So if a bunch of cannibals came running towards you...
Just leave them, they'll deal with themselves.
But if a bunch of these ghoulish cannibals went towards a human army and they were human ghouls, cannibals, they would eat those, would they be less effective against an orc army, for example, then? Or would they still be pretty strong?
I think orcs in general, as we've discussed in the past, they're the healthy option. They're mushrooms.
Yeah.
They'd be like a side salad for ghouls.
Yeah. It's the vegan alternative for cannibals.
The vegan alternative. And really the only other kind of significant unit of foot troops is what's referred to as the Grave Guard. These are what used to be referred to as wights in the old kind of the older army books. These are the elite undead skeletal troops of the vampire counts, or indeed of necromancers. So these are the ones that can hold a position, have some form of autonomy. They have more awareness about them than basic skeletons, but also some of the more powerful ones can actually lead armies. So these are the White Kings. These are the ancient dead nobility of various civilizations whose souls can be kind of hammered back in, and thus they can lead armies themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
I always had in my head that the wights were kind of sort of ghost-like.
No, those are wraiths.
That's wraiths.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, again, segue, because the next section, we're just going to talk about the kind of ethereal dead. These are the ghosts, the ghostly ones, the ones that don't really have a physical presence.
Right.
So in broad strokes, there's three main types of ethereal infantry. The first are ghosts, effectively what's called spirit hosts. So remember, we've talked previously about on the tabletop, you can field swarms of things, like swarms of spiders, swarms of snakes, and Skaven have rat swarms. With the undead forces, you can have spirit swarms. So what it looks like is 3 or 4 ghosts on a base, and they're immune. They used to be immune, I apologize. They used to be immune to all forms of non-magical weapon. Cool. So if you had one or more of them, you could really screw with someone's force. That has changed since that time to become they're immune to like positive and negative modifiers for weapons and attacks, this kind of thing. So it's just a basic sword will kill them in generally as quickly as a magical sword. There are some exceptions to that. So the other two ethereal kind of foot troops, with the word foot in quotes, are the Wraiths and the Banshees. Now, Wraiths in general are male spirits. Banshees in general are female spirits. In both cases, they are magic users, not necessarily necromancers, who have died a traumatic and horrifying death, and thus their spirit is tied to their body, seeking revenge.
In that case, there must be a shitload of Banshees and Wraiths. I mean, everyone in Warhammer dies a horrible, traumatic death.
It's very rare that anybody dies peacefully in their sleep in Warhammer.
Yeah. And okay, do they automatically become a Banshee / Wraith, or is there a process, a ceremony for them to become this tortured spirit.
I think it's if they have a traumatic death in an area where the wind of Dhar is quite strong.
Right.
Their auto wraith slash banshee.
So it's not an automatic thing, but if you die a horrific death in a graveyard, there's a solid chance that if you're a magic user, you're going to become a wraith or a banshee, depending on your gender. So banshees have the kind of stereotypical screaming power. So it's things like you roll 2 6-sided dice, and if the number is above the leadership stat of that troop type, so imagine Skaven in general have a leadership of 5, you roll an 11. The difference is the number of models you remove. So it can be quite a devastating power for lower leadership creatures. Cairn Wraiths, to give them their full name, Wraiths, effectively, they just are combat monsters because they have a huge scythe. They look like the Grim Reaper. That's their kind of ability. All of those units, the Spirit Hosts, the Wraiths, and the Banshees, broadly immune to a lot of mundane attacks. Certainly in earlier editions, but that changed. Those 3 ethereal troops, you would use them as kind of support for skeleton and zombie units. You would not, in general, group them all together. You would, have them dotted throughout the army to give them support.
Always Cairn Wraiths? Maybe could you have a Barrow Wraith?
Yeah, the Cairn Wraith was a term brought in the 7th or 8th edition where they were riding on the let's give everything a unique name so that we can protect our intellectual property.
I see. Okay. Right.
For most of Warhammer, they're just wraiths. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Those are the kind of additional infantry units that are available to necromancers and vampires who want, they're about town. They want to raise a bit of a force, go and cause a bit of problem. They can summon in some kind of hard-hitting additional units and some spooky, fear-inducing units as well. In terms of cavalry, you're really looking at 3 types: Black Knights, Blood Knights, and Hex Wraiths. So the Black Knights are skeletons on horses.
Cool.
There used to be
skeletons on skeleton horses.
Yes.
Or just normal horses.
Skeletons on rocking horses. What the fuck do you think we're dealing with here?
I don't know, it might have been a normal horse, like just an alive horse.
An alive, very confused horse who keeps giving all the other horses side eye. Yeah. So Black Knights are effectively just skeletons on skeleton steeds. They used to be referred to as skeletal horsemen in the 3rd and 4th edition of
it's too obvious.
Warhammer.
We can't call it that.
Yeah.
But it was a unit that had the capacity to become ethereal. So they could pass through terrain features and attack the troops that would be behind it. So they could, very swiftly move through towns and trees and other things that stand above 6 foot high.
Be a great prank to pull on your mounted skeleton colleague. Be like, oh, no, you're totally ethereal. We'll just run through that wall. Go on. He's going to do it.
Yeah, run through that wall as fast as you can.
Splat. Oh my god, he did it. He actually did it.
Blood Knights, then, these are the vampire or elite vampire cavalry. So they're the very kind of basic entry-level vampire position, and the most famous of those being the Blood Dragons, who are like a kind of Templar knightly order. That's how
our favourite. I like to think, right, Ben? Our favourite, the Blood Dragons.
Yeah, I think so. Pretty.
Aberration the Jets. Yeah.
Aberration the Jets. World Tour. A relatively new addition to kind of vampire count armies are the Hex Wraiths. And these are wraiths on horseback that I really don't know how much to... Oh, yes, they're on fire. So it's flaming wraiths on horseback.
Oh yeah, and one small point. Flambe!
I don't know how to jazz this one up anymore. Okay, wraiths, they don't walk anyway. They kind of float, glide around. Why do they need horseback, or are they still limited by their speed and range not being on horseback?
It really comes from their origins.
Or the horse is gliding along as well.
Whee. No. Wraiths, as you quite correctly say, hover just above the ground, and they're tied, in general, they're tied to their skeleton, to their remains. So they don't tend to travel very far from where they're buried, or where their remains are. They're not necessarily buried, are they? It's Warhammer. Who the fuck has time to bury anyone? It's constant fear of death. Hex wraiths really are spirits who've been pulled from the underworld. They're not necessarily magic users, but their mission is to hunt down the beings that have evaded death. Now, this could be a Nagash-style kind of godlike powerful being, or it could be Mor or one of the various other gods of death, but they are manifested and go after people who are either evil, or sorry, in general, who are evil because they have cheated death.
Right. Okay.
And the models for them are quite spectacular, because it really does just look like a wraith on a horse, all on fire.
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
So those really are the kind of two broad army types, or army positions. We've got the kind of massed infantry, of which 90% is either skeletons or zombies in some kind of combination. We then move into the kind of more interesting, I feel, units within a vampire count's army. One is war beasts, another is war machines. Again, they cover kind of broad types of units. For war beasts, we're looking at dire wolves, which are undead wolves, zombie wolves, that's effectively what they are. And also fell bats, which are bats the size of a person with a wingspan usually of about 10 to 12 feet. So
large.
The vampire bats, giant vampire bats.
There were just bats that were turned into vampires, or a specific breed?
They're yes, like vampire bats like we have in the real world. Yeah. But, 30 to
Human
40
size.
times bigger. Yeah,
Yeah.
human sized. If you can imagine, we'll start off with zombie dragons. Those are, we've discussed them previously. Drank a Dragon Dry.
It's always a good place to start.
Always a good place to start. There used to be rules for different types of dragon. So, a different, much like D&D, different color dragons have different types of breath and abilities, that kind of thing. We're now down to just one undead dragon type.
Oh, that seems a little bit shit, doesn't it?
Yeah. So these are either going to be dragons that have been killed and then reanimated, or they go to the Dragon's Graveyard, which is a place I'm only now just telling you about, which is at the bottom of the Darklands, right up against the World's Edge Mountains. When dragons sense that their time is approaching, they go to that area and die, and then their skeletal remains are found there, littered. You can't swing a skaven for hitting a bit of a dragon rib. And a lot of necromancers attempt to bind a dragon spirit back to its remains and then fly out of there as, a brand new owner of a zombie dragon. Zombie dragon, really, they're undead dragons. They're not necessarily strictly zombies anymore.
Wow.
But in general, these kinds of jaunts into the area of the dragon graveyard is a one-way ticket. You either come back on a dragon or you don't come back at all.
Why? What dangerous is there? It's just full of dead dragons.
It's full of dead dragons, mate, yeah.
So
yeah, that was a joke that landed on its arse. Yep. No, it's the Darklands. You have to contend with tribes of goblins, tribes of orcs, roaming slave bands of chaos dwarves.
Awesome.
Ghoul kind of tribes are in that area, as well as ogre kingdoms. You get some tribes that come through there as well on their way to either the Badlands or into the Empire to seek employment. Yes, it's not a great place to go. On top of, it's a fucking desert full of dragon remains. You could get tetanus. You could get the Warhammer equivalent of the atomic shits.
When a necromancer goes there, you know how you said, like, in the middle of a battle, like, a load of a necromancer's zombies might get killed, and then it would knit together a new zombie from some of the remains.
Yeah.
Could a necromancer do that in a kind of, a land of dragon bones? Does it have to all be from the same dragon, or could he have, like, that one's head, this one's tail, that one's pelvic
dragon
bone?
shop?
No, it has to be a single dragon. It has to be from a single entity. Dragons are so kind of imbued with magic that it sticks in their bones. So, even if they're able to avoid all the enemies that they'd have to kind of get past to be able to get to the graveyard, the magical or the difficulty of the spell that they're casting could obliterate their psyche completely. And and you're doing this against a being. You're trying to bind a magical being who's way more powerful than you to its dead remains. They're not probably going to be best pleased, so they will struggle and fight, and you'll have to dominate it for control.
Giggity.
Now, if we can imagine the size difference between a crocodile and a dragon, which I think is fairly easy, we can do that straight away. We can now imagine the similarity in comparison from a fell bat, the 6-foot bat, to something called a terrorgeist, which is a bat the size of a dragon, but dead.
What?
And so it's the skeletal remains of an enormous bat who uses its kind of echolocation as a weapon. So very much like the tomb banshee, it has a screeching attack, which effectively like a sonic flamethrower.
It beatboxes you to death.
Yeah, it's exactly what it does. It will decimate you. I mean, it'll shatter blood vessels in anything that's living.
Wow.
Reminds me of the Forbidden West game. You get there's the new monster. And it's Aloy fights the big old bat thing. Do you remember that thing?
Oh yeah.
It's one of the
and
end mecha
sonic
things you fight. It's fucking cool.
It's got like a sonic attack, isn't it? Yeah. So sorry, that was a Felgeist.
A terrorgeist.
Oh, sorry, a terrorgeist. Right.
And in general, these are either bound to an army, so they're like effectively a wild beast that's summoned, like a giant scaly bat version of a hawk, or they are used as mounts by the Strigoi because of their kind of bestial intelligence. They're able to dominate other animals. Yeah.
Ooh, cool. Where does the fell bats and these Felgeists reside? You say they're not actually kind of raised terrorgeist, excuse me. They're not raised undead. They are
in general, Sylvania, the World's Edge Mountains, the bottom half of the Darklands. In general, that's where you'll find them. But they will be attracted to anywhere that has a significant kind of the wind of Dhar, kind of dark energy to it.
They're not exclusively allied to undead, so you can encounter these just as wild feral beasts, and they don't necessarily have to be tied to the undead. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah,
they're easily summoned to kind of not service, but ally themselves with undead forces because of the sheer amount of magical energy that's used, and they're attracted to that kind of thing.
Roger.
They're undead. Sorry, they're.
Fell bats are not undead. They're living creatures. Terrorgeists are undead. They are giant skeletal bats.
And what were they before? Were they giant
living bats? Yeah.
Gotcha. Right. Okay. Cool.
You then have really 3 types of kind of generic steed. Maybe 4, in fact. You've got skeletal steed, which is effectively a skeletal horse. You've got something called nightmares, which are undead war horses. So these either will be skeletons or will look like zombies. They'll be emaciated. I mean, they'll be dead, but they won't have like chunks hanging off them and stuff. They will have holes in them, which leads me to believe that when they run, they whistle. But they
the faster they go, the higher the pitch.
Yeah. You then have something called the Hell Steeds. It used to be called Abyssal Terrors. And these are undead Pegasus. That's how you think of them.
Flying undead horses.
Winged war horses that are ridden either by master necromancers or vampires. So we're looking at infantry and cavalry. Now you add in the kind of monstrous war beast, either packs of dire wolves hunting around the edges of an army, skirmishing forward, or these enormous dragons and terrorgeists, which are, either loose or ridden as mounts by the kind of generals and heroes of the army. So you can kind of get a sense of this tidal wave of death coming towards you. Punctuated
as opposed
within
to a regular friendly tidal wave. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, and indifferent. At best, tidal waves can be thought of as indifferent.
Sure.
Dead tidal waves just want to kill you.
Sure. Yeah.
The final thing we'll look at to close out the kind of rundown are the war machines, and really, there's kind of four broad groups of war machines. The first is what's referred to as the corpse carts. These are, you can imagine, it's a wagon pulled not by horses but by zombies who have been impaled onto the kind of the shaft at the front of a wagon, and so they stumble forward as a necromancer or corpse master, as they're sometimes referred to, stabs dead bodies with a spear and kind of chucks it into the back of the cart.
Like roadkill.
Yeah, like roadkill. But
while shouting, "Bring out your dead!
Bring out your dead!"
But I'm not dead yet.
These are kind of extensions of necromantic influence. So they pulse with kind of really dark magic, but also can be used as a focus for necromancers and vampires to cast spells. So on the tabletop, if a corpse cart is within, say, 12 inches of a necromancer, and he's casting a spell that is 12 inches in kind of range, he can actually measure the range from the corpse cart, if you see what I mean. Okay. So it's a way of extending influence.
Like a Wi-Fi hub.
Exactly right. It's an undead, shambling, smelly, shitty Wi-Fi hub. What's of interest about these things is that they were all created at once by an event. They were all created during the Black Plague. So many people died, and especially in Sylvania, and there's so much warpstone dust and particles just in Sylvania anyway, that they spontaneously created. They spontaneously came into existence from the Bring Out Your Dead corpse carts that were rolling around the place.
Oh, wow.
They were then bound into service by one necromancer, Frederick Van Hall. You remember we talked about him briefly.
The infamous Van Hall Dance Macabre.
Yeah, exactly right. He invented the spell. He created that spell. All of the corpse carts that ever existed were bound to his service. Now, when he fell, the corpse carts became quote-unquote wild corpse carts, and they just tottered off into the world in various directions. So they're found all over the old world now as kind of focus points for dark energy and zombies, really. On the tabletop, they act as kind of as necromantic Wi-Fi hubs, but also as a focus for assisting in the maintenance of zombie regiments. So you'll recall at the start of the episode, we talked about a spell where you're able to return an amount of models to a unit. If a zombie unit of a certain size is within range of a corpse cart, it can add more. It can return more. So it regenerates the body count, as it were. It also comes with kind of two upgrades that you can add in.
9-inch wheels.
Balefire, 9-inch wheels, spikes, UV lights.
Yeah. A shit but loud sound system.
Yeah. But it has one is like a magical brazier.
Brazier.
That A brassiere.
A
No.
magical bra.
A magical bra? Aren't they all magical, Ben?
Spoken like a true pervert.
The balefire makes it more difficult to cast spells within it that are not necromantic. So it is a signal jammer for magical energy. It makes it more difficult for enemy wizards to cast spells. And the other thing it can have instead of that is what's called an unholy lodestone, and it allows you to
take my unholy load stone.
No. It allows you in the game. It allows you to re-roll a dice to see how many figures you return to the unit. So it makes your zombies last longer in
resilient.
battle.
Right.
The next then is black coaches. These are black coaches. So these are stage coaches. Drawn straight from the kind of story of Dracula, where there's a funeral coach. You know what I mean? These old-fashioned kind of funerary coaches. It was the one that picked up Keanu Reeves and took him to see Dracula.
Right. Yeah.
So in the game, these are funeral coaches driven by a wraith or controlled by a wraith who sits in the driver's seat and pulled by a pair or more of skeletal horses.
Cool.
These are quite powerful within the game because lore-wise, when a vampire is killed, if his followers can get to his remains quickly enough, they can put it in a coffin and put it in the back of one of these black coaches, where it kind of holds it in stasis until the correct rituals or items can be organized to resurrect the vampire. It feeds off of death and off of magical necrotic power. In the game, this is kind of realized by, every time you cast a spell, if you roll a 6, you kind of make a note of how many 6s you roll in a given turn. And depending on how many 6s you roll, a black coach will have, one or more additional abilities, up to the capacity to fly. So it can fly around the battlefield, zapping people with death energy. But yeah, very, very kind of fluffy lore, loyal to the kind of lore of vampires.
They sound quite pimp as well, like the stretched limo of the undead world. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
The Von Carsteins and the Lamians are kind of having a little get-together. You get like fucking armadas of these black coaches just rocking up.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to be seen in anything else.
No, not at all.
Segue. Speaking of Lamias.
Excellent.
Segue.
They are the type of vampire that most commonly have this next war machine. It's called a coven throne. So if you can imagine an unbelievably ornate throne mounted on a pedestal with enough space for 4 or 5 kind of vampire ladies on it, and it's literally a platform that's lifted up and transported by ghosts.
Cool.
So it's a coven throne. The model is absolutely spectacular. And so as it moves through the battlefield, it has its own kind of combat capacity because of all the ghosts and the spirits that are making it move. But it is also effectively a chariot for vampire queens who have their own kind of capacity for hand-to-hand combat. In general, they are gathered around a large cauldron of blood in the center of the throne, at the foot of the kind of head Lamian queen vampire's chair. And it allows them to kind of see into the future, but it also is a focus for something called the Battle of Wills. And this is where this kind of idea of domination of their enemies comes into play. Through various game mechanics, you can actually end up picking an enemy unit and making every model in that unit fight once against another model in that unit. So if you have a model of 20 soldiers, you roll 20 dice, and on a 5+ or a 6+, they successfully kill one of their comrades. So it allows you to disrupt units and certainly put the fear of God or the fear of vampires into your enemies. The kind of final war engine we'll talk about is something called a mortis engine. This is built from the same kit as the Coven throne. So it is, again, a large platform carried through by spirit hosts. But in it is
with
held
music.
Yeah. with live music, with jazz. It has within it a reliquary that holds a single malevolently evil artifact. This can either be some form of remains of some powerful undead being, or more commonly, a weapon or item or piece of jewelry that's been enchanted, or a book or scroll, sometimes even something that's rumored to have been written by Nagash himself. And as this moves towards the enemy forces, the corpse master or the necromancer who is using it as a mount can open the reliquary, and blasts of dark energy can come out. It's very much like the Ark of the Covenant in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
Not Lord of the Rings. What the fuck am I talking about? The Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I did not see that version of that film. That was...
where the German's face melts. And
the Ark of the Covenant in that show, Friends.
Yeah. The Ark of the Covenant in The Sound of Music.
It can also be upgraded to include like a blasphemous library. It can have an evil bookshelf mounted on it, which again causes kind of magical interference against enemy magicians, and makes failing to cast a spell more of a perilous endeavor.
Love it. They open a book.
Like
Jesus
when Ben
Christ.
tries to do his intros and Darren is constantly sticking his stick in the spokes and trying to trip people up. Right, Darren?
Right, Darren.
Right,
Darren.
Daz.
And that's really it. That's the end of the Vampire Count run through. Again, I'd just like you to try, because we do make a lot of jokes about stuff, but it must be horrific to face an undead horde heading towards you, which is not only going to steamroller over you, but in all likelihood, your dead body will be raised to join that army. And it's not just an army of infantry. You've got undead cavalry, war machines, war beasts. It's the full Monty.
Yes, that does sound horrific. However, your point about them not only being slain by these horrible horrors, but then being re-raised to serve them, you say that as if that's like an additional horrible thing to go through. Is it? Or are you dead at that point and you're not even conscious anyway?
Well, it's dead for... I know you don't like to think about your friends and family, Kral, but like your friends and family could be upset that, your dead body is now up and about wanting to kill them, as opposed to your living body.
Tell me how to live my life or undead life.
I mean, you raise it is a good point, believe it or not, Ben. That in terms of like domination, we just talked about the kind of battle of wills where you can, force an enemy unit to fall upon itself in battle. The Lamian vampires are actually able to access almost every other Warhammer Armies book and include one hero from that force that has been dominated by the Vampire Queen into service.
Cool.
Wow.
So you frequently find like human knights or nobles in the service of Lamian vampires. Yeah.
Crazy. Nice.
Sorry to sort my
But
back
that's
out.
it.
So, Darren, that's your favourite faction.
Yes. Can't you tell? Because we've talked about it for a year.
Only 2 years left. I haven't been asked this, but I'm going to answer it anyway. My favourite units, faction of undead, are probably the blood dragons. They just seem badass. Aberrash seems badass.
Yeah.
His way becoming a blood dragon seems a bit embarrassing. Sticking himself inside a dragon and like flailing around and
turning himself into a human tick.
Yeah, they seem like the coolest. The Von Carsteins sound stuck up. The Lamians seem pretty cool as well. No beef with them, but still, I think the blood dragon Strigoi, pretty cool, bestial. But yeah, it's in terms of vampire counts, I guess. Yeah, the Aberrash and the Jets for sure.
Aberrash
Ben?
and the Jets,
Mr. Ben.
I quite like. I agree. I think the blood dragon's probably the coolest, but I do quite like the Lamians. I like the idea of their kind of not stealthy,
Saboteur.
but kind of saboteur, kind of political machinations sort of jam. That is very cool. And their war engine sounds pretty badass as well.
The Coven throne, yeah.
I just had a look at the picture for that Mortis engine. My God, what a complicated... Where do you even start painting something like that? There's more...
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
You have to do what's called sub-assemblies. You have to paint it in parts and then assemble
put it together.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
there's one. I'll see if I can find the video. I don't know. We might be able to link the video on the website where someone turned it into a music box. So that when they opened the kind of gates of the reliquary on the model, LEDs came on, but also you saw like there was ghosts spiraling around it on the model. He actually made them move, so they actually turn. So it does. It looks
and there was
really
music
good.
like Earth, Wind, and Fire coming out the fucking thing. Like
it was playing Rasputin, which I just thought was weird. Rasputin.
Awesome.
For me, I'd have to go with Nagash till the end of days, but the Necrarchs. I love the Necrarchs. That kind of isolationist, supreme magicians. I love that. I love their concept.
Yeah.
You know, I've just realised we have not given Timmy the Blood Grenade enough mentions in this series. We mentioned him right in the first episode, but he never made another appearance.
Well, and that's because he was taken into the care of the Sylvanian state childcare system.
That's what it was. Yeah.
He was
just
the board.
He was a one-use weapon, wasn't he? Just
Whee! Well, he lived up to his name, didn't he?
Timmy One Use.
Timmy One Use. No, a grenade. A grenade.
Oh, Timmy One Use grenade. Yeah. Most grenades are one use, aren't they? By definition.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we've been sent anything, right? Like a recording.
Yeah,
we've been sent a recording.
From
you may know this person, but I'll just hit play so you can.
Is this from Beyond the Grave?
Bow before me, mere mortals. Tremble at your impending
Oh, sorry about that. It's me, Nagash, your friendly neighbourhood Lord of the Undead, necromantic pioneer, and all-round evil dude. But you can just call me Samantha, or His Unholiness, whichever you prefer.
I do not approve.
Now, just had 5 minutes to spare between meddling with the 19th Vampire War and me 174th Resurrection. So thought I'd drop you boys a little message just to say thanks for your great coverage of me history, and the histories of me various sired offspring, if you can call those elixir of life robbing bastards offspring. Anyway, it's been a real joy to hear some of the highlights of me illustrious career told by someone with a clear sexual attraction to ogre-sized Lich Kings. And by ogre-sized Lich Kings, I obviously mean me. Oh, look at me, getting all flustered. Darren, you massive flirt.
Carry on the gash, huh?
The rest of the puny races on this shithole planet seem to express their gratitude through the gift of honorary names. Far be it from me to break with tradition, I've followed in their footsteps and sent some over to my number one fan. I'm keen to see if you can read them without swooning. Well, the puddle of evil pot noodle forming in me black pyramid is just about getting to the nether regions now, which, as you can imagine, takes a bit of concentration to get right, so I must be off. The winds of Dhar wait for no man, as they say. Ciao for now, fellas. See you at the end times, I guess. Now, where was I? Ah, yes.
Tremble at your impending doom.
Oh, cheers, Nagash.
Yay!
He's all right, isn't he?
So that was nice, wasn't it?
Lovely.
Got a nice
Well, the Lord of
surprise.
Death himself.
So, I do have this email in front of me from our Lord and Savior Nagash.
Amazing.
Who would like to go first? We have 3 honorary names per...
Crow, go for it.
Yeah, do me.
Do me.
Do me. So we have, I think from the looks of it, we have a general vampire name. We have a Kemrian vampire name. So this is a high honor. So it's a name based in the ancient days of Nehekara. And then we have a von Karstein name. So he's giving us straight in with the high honors. It's not a thing to do. Well, yeah, we'll start with Chris. You'll get the order.
Go.
The options are Brad von Karstein, the blazing wrangler of fearsome beasts.
Okay.
Shior Stack, Bloodlord of Lilliput. See what I did there? Short stack. I love that.
Nice.
And the Kemrian chef of the court of Zandri, Nuttin Ramen.
That one. Nut and ramen.
Brilliant.
Short, sharp, to the point. Love it. Nut and ramen.
Right, do me.
Ben, in order, yours are Moistest von Karstein, Lord of the Tinder Bone Glades.
Good, all right.
Your Kemrian name translates as the smiling killer of Kemri. I beg your pardon. Your Nehekarian name translates as the smiling killer of Kemri. If you're happy.
Okay, right.
And your final name is really actually quite a famous, I recognize this name, it's a famous Casanova-style Lamian vampire from Altdorf called Alphonse Duminge.
Again, it's got to be the last one. Alphonse
Duminge.
Love it.
Alphonse Duminge, Nuttin Ramen. Okay, do you want to hear mine?
Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
tough shit. Thanks for listening, everyone. Okay, mine are Gareth von Karstein, Operations Manager of the Slovenian State Childcare Program.
Okay. Yeah.
My Nehekaria name translates as the Incensed Lord of the Crimson Desert. It's the fuck's that? And my final name is Garadan, Lord of Flesh Pies.
Oh,
Flesh pies.
It's got to be Gareth, isn't it? It's definitely Gareth.
Gareth von Karstein.
Gareth von Karstein. Or as good a name as Keith von Karstein or
Keith
Kevin
von
von
Karstein,
Karstein. Oh, well, thanks, Nagash. That was
Cheers, Gashi Nashi.
Alphonse Duminge, Nuttin Ramen, and Gareth von Karstein.
Nut and ramen. Brilliant.
It's the Holy Trinity right there.
As Nick Cage would say, high praise.
Right, well, yeah, sorry, the other thing is I want to suck your blood. So we're going to call... Okay, do you want to get another mention of it in now before I call it?
Well, I did it at the beginning of this episode, didn't I?
Okay, so is that it? You're done?
He's trying to trick you. He's trying to trick you so he can win. Look at his face! He fucking is as well.
Yeah.
I'm actually not, mate. I'm actually trying to give you a chance because I've hit it right on the fucking money.
Did you?
Okay,
I can't
it.
remember. Did I actually say it once each episode?
Not really, no. Dhar, your guess was 11 times.
Yeah.
How many times do you think he said it?
6.
So close. And if he'd taken my offer there, it would have been 6. It was 5. And my guess was 5. So, yeah.
I want to suck your blood.
Yeah.
Nah, it doesn't count.
It
doesn't count. Right, okay. While Dhar's figuring out what he is going to buy me, I am going to wrap up. All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind-the-scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast. Big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this without you guys. You cover our costs and allow us more time planning content. If you're not part of this merry band, you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and want to support us, head over to patreon.com/laying down the lore and sign up today for as little as £3. This will give you access to our Discord server so you can come and chat with us directly, and there's an ever-growing pile of exclusive bonus content on there. We'll be back again soon, displaying just how little Chris knows. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Not if I see you first.
Laying down the law.